Hello. All right. I see we are live. People are here. Great. Glad to see people. Let's hear a little bit of startup music here. So again, welcome everyone. This is Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore, and welcome to the MuseScore Café. So do let me know if things are going okay here. In addition to whatever ordinary problems I might encounter, we're going to be experimenting. We're going to be looking at alpha software here. This is going to be MuseScore 4 we're going to be talking about today. It's pretty exciting, but it's also, it's experimental and scary. So we'll just see how it goes. So thanks people for checking in here and letting me know. I see people coming from all sorts of places around the world, which is great. So today's episode is kind of special. We're talking about the MuseScore 4 Alpha, which technically speaking is not quite released yet still. It was expected to have happened yesterday, and I'm going to show what is, I think, going to be the MuseScore 4 Alpha. But apparently, there's some things holding up actually making any sort of announcement about where you can download it. And so I'm going to kind of keep tabs on that and update everyone when I have a link I can share with you. But we're going to fire it up anyhow and just take a tour so that you can see what is going on with MuseScore 4. All right. So that said, I'm actually going to close MuseScore 3 here. And I'm going to do this because on my computer, at least, having both of them open at once is just a little problematic. It doesn't work as smoothly. Sometimes they interfere with each other a little bit. I'm told other people don't have that problem, so it could be some, Chromebook specific issue or whatever. But to hopefully have things go as smoothly as possible, I'm going to start MuseScore 4, and I'm also going to start it. So first of all, you can see if you're seeing my screen, which you should be, and you can see all the way to the bottom, hopefully you can see the icon for MuseScore 4. Can you all see that? It's kind of purple with kind of yellowish, orangish lettering for the icon for the actual logo. So this is what the MuseScore 4 logo icon will look like. But if I start that up right now, and I'm actually so if I start it up from the icon right now, it is going to start like already started because I've already used it a few times. So I'm going to start it from the command line instead, which you won't normally need to do, just so I can have it reset to factory settings so you can see what it will look like when you first start it. All right, so pretend that you've clicked the icon, but I'm going to have to do it this way instead to give you a really fresh, clean start. So fancy new splash screen that we see. And when MuseScore 4 opens, this is the first thing we're going to see. So if you think about MuseScore 3, you probably have forgotten that the first time you installed it, it asked you a few questions on startup. And that's going to be the case for MuseScore 4 as well. The first time you start it up, it is going to ask you a few questions. And you know what? I'm hearing some notifications coming in because I still don't understand completely how to turn that off. But I'm going to open the Discord server where MuseScore is being discussed and close that because I think that's where the notifications are coming in. All right, so the very first thing you're going to see when you start MuseScore 4 is going to be some startup questions for you, and I'm going to walk you through these because they're interesting to know what's actually going on here. So the first question is about the color theme. And MuseScore 3 had light and dark themes, but MuseScore 4 takes this a step further, actually several steps further, with easy ways of customizing the color highlights, and also, as I will probably show if someone reminds me, you can even extend that to the color of your score. So if you think it's going to be useful to you to see your score as a black with white staff lines at night, go for it. Or just for accessibility reasons. I know there's certain people who have vision issues who really want dark themes with light text as a way of being more visible to them, and you will be able to do that. So Heist back and start and again. Oh, so you must have restarted. I don't know. Is anyone else having a problem I should know about? I'm not aware of any other problems going on, so I'm just going to keep going. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select. Well, I'm not going to select the dark theme. We're just going to talk about the theme separately. The default theme is still going to be the light theme, but I will say the handbook, the documentation that you get from the help menu in MuseScore, all the screenshots in the handbook are going to use the dark theme. We're kind of pushing the dark theme. I'm ambivalent myself on dark themes. I tend not to prefer them, but whatever. I'm trying to get used to it both ways. So for now, I'm just going to go with the default, and I'm not going to use the high contrast mode, but I'll show you what those are. All right. The next thing you're going to see is something that sounds exciting, but don't get your hopes up. This is going to be this exciting new realistic playback library. And this is not, MuseSounds is going to be supposedly amazing. For people who are familiar with what Note Performer does, it's a third-party commercial program that you can use with Sibelius and other notation programs. It's not just better sounds, but it's better sounds with some processing, whether you call it artificial intelligence or whatever you call it, something, it's more than just sounds. It's sounds and some form of making them as realistic as possible. So it is not just a better sound font. However, it's not there yet. So you get to see the dialogue here telling you it's eventually going to be here, but it is not here. So you can hit the download button all you want. Nothing's going to happen. Nothing happens, right? So don't get all excited and hit the download button and then wonder what's happening. This MuseSounds library should be ready by the beta release, which, maybe another month or two or whatever. We'll see. So we're just going to skip past the MuseSounds. And now the next screen of this startup wizard here that you're only going to see the first time you start MuseScore is telling you that, well, behind this dialog is the Learn section where you will find tutorials to get you started. All right, so I'm just going to hit Finish. This screen that we're on right now is one that you see the very first time you start MuseScore, and it's got some tutorial videos that are still in the process of being created. I'm not actually involved in the creation of these videos, but I've checked some of them out, and they seem like they're pretty well done. So if you click on any of these, it's going to be some tutorials to do some fairly basic things, basics of score writing. It's a 4-minute introduction to how to enter notes into MuseScore, right? So there's these tutorial videos that you will see. And if you click the Advanced tab, you're going to see some other videos. However, if you know who these people are here, Michael Cowgill, George Hess, I'm actually not sure about Rob Birdwell. These are older videos. These are videos that were, editing the drum palette in MuseScore 1.1. This is George Hess's tutorial for MuseScore 2. So I'm not sure what the plan is for these advanced tutorials, but they will probably be ones that are sourced from YouTube or wherever else. And then if you click where it says classes, hey, I know that guy. I remember him. I haven't not had the beard for a few years. I agree, but this picture is not as old as you might think. It's 5 years old. But in any case, this is where you'll find the link to my course. So how are we doing here? So Brian is mentioning staff pad, and this is something I don't know the answer to. I actually don't know. So StaffPad, for people who aren't aware, is a program that was originally developed for the Microsoft Surface, as I recall, and it only worked with the Microsoft Surface. It depended on using a pen, and so it was a Windows program, but it only worked on the Microsoft Surface with the touchscreen and the particular special Microsoft stylus, and it was a handwriting recognition that let you notate using handwriting recognition. And two things happened last year or within the last 2 years of interest. One is the Muse Group, which is the company that kind of owns MuseScore and MuseScore.com and Audacity now also. The Muse Group bought StaffPad a year or two ago and released an iPad version, I think. I think the iPad version came first. So I could be wrong. But anyhow, yes, StaffPad is well known for having good sounds. And I don't know to what extent MuseSounds is based on StaffPad, but I think it's a fairly common speculation that it might be based at least in part on StaffPad. But that is not like information that I'm privy to. Okay, so there we go. Supposedly I should be able to scroll this window here and see a button to sign up for my class, but right now that doesn't seem to be working. That's unfortunate. All right, so this whole section here that you're looking, oh, where's MuseScore? Where, give me some notes. So here's the deal. This is the Learn section here under the Home tab. So before I leave the Home tab, because I'm not going to come back to it, I'm going to show you that also you can get at plugins. So plugins I can scroll, but Learn I can't. I can scroll there, but I can't scroll classes. All right, that's going to be a problem, right? Anyhow, plugins is going to be, these are plugins that are pre-installed, and you'll see that some of my favorites are now here. The Courtesy Accidentals plugin is now going to be pre-installed. Oh, that makes me so happy. And there's a tuning plugin that's also pre-installed. So these are going to be the pre-installed plugins. But then you'll also be able to download new ones just like you always have. And because I'm sure some people are wondering, as far as I know, the plugin framework hasn't changed in any major way. So there's a good chance that most existing plugins will still work in MuseScore 4. They might require some small updating, but there's not like this major, massive update like happened between MuseScore 1 and 2. Maybe even between 2 and 3. I don't even know. All right. So plugins are going to be here. And I've never actually tried any of these plugins. If I click one, looks like I can define a shortcut for it, and I can enable it. Great. I've now enabled Courtesy Accidentals. I've never done this before. That's the Configure Courtesy Accidentals, and that's what you use if you want to customize how that plugin works. But the Add Courtesy Accidentals and Remove Courtesy Accidentals are the ones that I use more often. So now I've got those installed. All right. If I now go to the Scores tab, we are going to see this page again. This is the page you're going to see normally when you first start MuseScore. You're going to see something that looks kind of like the old Start Center. If you've already opened any scores, you're going to see thumbnails for them here, and you're going to see a button to open a new score, to create a new score, and open other scores. So this is going to be what you normally see when you start MuseScore. But before I leave, so this is all part of this Home tab. Then there's also going to be this My Account business where you can, create your accounts on MuseScore.com and sign into that, etc. So that will also be kind of all wrapped into this Home tab here. Now, the main meat of MuseScore everything that you're used to seeing is on the Score tab. So I'm going to come to that last. I'm next going to move on to the Publish tab. So the Publish tab has very little on it right now. It's got a print button and an export button. You don't have to go to the Publish tab every time you want to print or every time you want to export. But I think the plan is over time for this to grow and have more stuff in it. All right. So because this is a model that other notation programs are moving to. This idea of having a flow where you start home and then you work on your score and then you work on its layout and then you publish it, and moving from one tab to the next like that. And so they're sort of making some motion in that direction. But now let's finally go to the Score tab, which is where you actually do things of interest. All right, so here we are. We are now in MuseScore, which, as you will see, does not have an empty score by default. So if I go back to the Home tab here and back to the scores, here's where I could create a new score. But if I go back to the Score tab, the same commands that have always existed, File, New, to create a new score, or Open to open an existing score. I'm going to create a new one, all right? And then we'll look at some existing ones. So I'll create a new score, and the first thing we see is the wizard here. And the wizard looks a bit different. If you remember how it works in MuseScore 3, the first thing you're asked for is a title and a composer. Then you're asked about selecting instruments. Well, in MuseScore 4, the instrument selection comes first. And so it's a new looking dialogue, but it's essentially the same stuff. And you're going to hear me say that over and over again. Things are going to look different, but be essentially the same. Actually, the differences having to do with how instruments work and how parts work, that's probably the most different thing there is. Most things are just cosmetically different, but things having to do with instruments and especially parts are a little more significantly different. Let's go ahead and create a score. So first of all, you're going to see choose instruments and create from template. So instead of the template selection being first and foremost, and then a choose instruments button, there are going to be two tabs at the top of this dialog. So you can either choose what instrument you want or choose to create from template. So I think I'm just going to use Grand Staff template. Okay, that's what I'm going to do because that's what I've decided I want to do. And now I'll go ahead and hit, well, let's go also for choose instruments. If I choose keyboards, now I can pick piano. And then I can either double click it or click it once and then click the arrow. And so this dialog works essentially the same way it always has, just laid out a little different. All right. Then if I hit done now, just like with MuseScore 3, it'll skip everything else and finish. But let's go through the rest of the dialog. So the next screen here, if you remember, there used to be a key signature section and then also a time signature section, and the tempo control was somewhere in there also, as was other stuff. But now all of this is in one dialog. The key signature and the time signature and the title and composer is all in this dialog. So now I can pick, yes, I want C major. I want 4/4. Let's do 3/4. I never do 3/4. You pick a tempo here, and then you pick, can I actually enter a tempo without entering the tempo marking? No, it looks like not. So I'm going to enter the tempo marking and say I want it to be 100. And then I can say how long I want it and whether I want to pick up. So these are all, and I'll go ahead and tell it I want to pick up because why not? And now I can enter a title, first MuseScore 4 score. And what happened? Did I press? Oh, I didn't press tab. Wait a minute. Did tab not work? Where did tab take me? Tab took me to the cancel button, not to the composer field. So is that a bug or is it going to be F6? Nope, because F6 is used to navigate around. What about right arrow? No? How about control right arrow? All right, so it could be that there's a bug an accessibility bug here where tab doesn't take me to composer field. I'm going to try to remember that. And in fact, you know what? Yeah, I'm just gonna. I feel like I need to write this down. So bear with me. I'm going to create a little document here where I write down my notes on bugs that I discover during this demo. Okay. So I enter my name here, and still tab doesn't go where I want. Yeah, there might be some shortcut that's going to get me over between these fields, but I don't know what it is. All right, let's go ahead, and now there's no more next, so I'm done. So now we see the score finally. And let me just check in on the chat here. The question about the compatibility is going to be the same as it was between 1 and 2, between 2 and 3, and 3 and 4. And I mentioned this in the newsletter as well. MuseScore 4 files will not be openable in MuseScore 3. Too much has changed about things internally. And even if you hacked it to work, it wouldn't look the same because too much has changed again. So yes, if you're going to be working on scores where you think you might, if you've already worked on them in MuseScore 3 and then you want to play with them in MuseScore 4, make a separate copy. Absolutely. If you create a score whole in MuseScore 4, it's just always going to be in MuseScore 4. Or if you created it in MuseScore 3, you've opened it in MuseScore 4, and you're happy with it, and you don't feel you'll ever need to go back to MuseScore 3 for it, by all means, save over it. But if you're ever expecting to need to go back and forth between 3 and 4, 2 copies of the score is what you'll need. Okay, so, and yes, Colleen, I see you asked and answered your own question, so great. All right, so this is now what I'm going to be seeing in my score. So there's a couple things that you will be noticing are different, right? You're looking at the screen and going, oh, what do I see? Let me give you a little tour of what we're seeing. So first of all, the palettes are now, well, they're on the left, just like they always have been. But remember the inspector that's usually on the right, that is no longer there on the right by default, and it's no longer called inspector. It's called properties. And it's actually tabbed with palettes on the left by default, with the idea being it takes up less space that way. Now, you could do that in MuseScore 3. That was always possible, to drag your inspector over there and dock it on the left and have it tab. You could do that in MuseScore 3, but it wasn't done by default. The decision has been made to make that default for MuseScore 4. If enough people say, no, change it back, they'll change it. But so far, that's not the feedback that people are giving. But just so you can see, I could drag this sucker over here, and now it's off on the other side where you're used to. All right? But I'm going to put it back where it's always been. Not there. So it's here. All right. So I've got palettes and I've got properties. Properties is the new name for what was the inspector. But let's start with the palettes here. The palettes work almost the same as always. But you'll notice a couple of things here. There's some new palettes. There's one called pitch. And this has in it basically the octave markings and this ambitus marking that's used in mostly Renaissance music. And under the More button, you'll see, some more octave markings if you ever want to use those. So these octave markings are under the pitch palette. And you'll also see there is now a palette called keyboard that has pedal markings. Is there anything else under More? No. So you might be wondering, well, why are there new palettes that way? The idea is the lines palette is where these things used to be, and it had all these sort of unrelated things: octave markings, pedal markings, hairpins, voltas, all these sort of unrelated things all on one palette. Well, this has been sort of reorganized now, where There's a pitch palette that has octave lines. There's a keyboard palette that has pedal markings. Voltas are here on the repeats palette, and because that's where they kind of go. And hairpins are on the dynamics palette. So the lines palette is no longer so necessary. Okay. So it still exists, at least for now, but it's not there by default. So the default set of palettes, it's kind of like in MuseScore 3, there was the basic workspace. Well, that's what you're seeing here. It's the basic workspace. And then in MuseScore 3, there was an advanced workspace that would add other palettes. So far in MuseScore 4, we haven't added an advanced workspace. Instead, you just add the palettes yourself that you want. So if you want more palettes, you click the Add Palettes button, and here are the palettes that don't show by default. So some of these palettes I'm never going to use. Like, well, let's talk about some of these palettes. And I see some comments in here that I'm going to address in a second here. But I want to stick to the palettes for the moment. So when I add palettes, the brackets palette, this, for me, I feel like shouldn't be necessary because MuseScore should handle bracketing correctly by default. I know it won't necessarily always, but to me, I'm not going to want the brackets palette always. Ornaments palette, though, I use ornaments, so I want that. Breaths and pauses, sure, I use that. Grace notes, sure, I use that. The note heads palette, it's a little hard to click the plus button because the scroll bar keeps popping up. That's sort of a known issue that I'm sure they'll fix before the release. So the note heads palette, you don't really need. So I heard some talk about the inspector and not being comfortable with what the inspector is, but the inspector is incredibly useful. It's how you do a lot of things. It's how you change fonts. It's how you change sizes of things. It's how you do a ton of stuff in MuseScore. And so it's still the case that you're going to do those things using the properties panel, but note heads, we don't need the note heads palette because everything it does is also in properties pretty much. So I'm not going to add that. I'll go ahead and add arpeggios. I'll add tremolos. I'll add a guitar palette. I'll add the fingering palette, but I don't use fretboard diagrams. I don't work with accordion. I don't work with bagpipe embellishments. Beam properties, as this is for like if you want to change your beaming from having your eighth notes all beamed to being like individually showing flags or break a beam somewhere or join a beam somewhere. But all of that stuff now you will be able to do in the properties thing. We won't need a palette for it. So I'm not going to add that one, and I'm not going to add the lines palette. So for me, this is my my set of palettes now. So I added those palettes. Where did they go? Oh, they all got added on the top. So I would then have to like kind of drag these around to make them a little more to my liking. So my initial setup of getting things like, I don't want the fingering palette at the top. I want it somewhere down here where text is, right? And also, by the way, right now the palettes, I have multiple palettes open at a time. You may have noticed when I work with MuseScore, I usually have it set so opening one palette closes the others. I like that. I like having only one palette open at a time. So if I click the ... here, I'm going to click only one palette at a time. Now notice another option that you saw in there, single click to open a palette. This was something that kind of changed for the worse, I think most people would say. Let me go ahead and collapse all palettes. That's nice. So now if I open one palette, when I open another one, it automatically closes the other. Somewhere around MuseScore 3.3, the way the palettes work changed so that single click didn't open a palette. You had to either double click it or click the little arrow. But now you can see single click does open a palette now. So that's kind of nice. All right, so now I want to come back and address some of these comments here. So the thing about the inspector is, yeah, it's wasted space most of the time. And so what you would see me doing all the time during these cafes and during the music masterclass is just close it. So I got to know and love F8, the shortcut to open and close the inspector. Because when you need it, you need it. But most of the time you don't, right? So I would just open and close it on command. So now it's just sort of hidden away. So Dave, when you're talking about having windows being hidden behind other ones, that can happen if you undock them. If you undock the windows, now they are separate windows, and sure, they can go behind others. I don't actually recommend undocking the windows. I'd recommend leaving them docked, specifically to avoid that sort of happening. But you can undock windows in MuseScore 3, or you can dock them. Can I undock this? Can I undock the palettes? Let's see. Yes, it looks like I can whoops, I thought I did. There we go. I have now undocked the palettes. And now that I've undocked the palettes, I think I can hide it behind other things. Let's shrink this guy down. And how do I make this thing full? Because I don't want you to be looking at all my stuff here. Just, oh well. So yeah, you can definitely have docked windows hidden behind other windows, right? That's perfectly normal. That's how Windows works. I assume it's how Mac OS works. It's where the name Windows comes from, though. So if they're separate windows, they can hide each other. So I don't recommend undocked palettes or things because I don't find that useful. But just know that that's what happens if you do. I want this the way it was on the left, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to control the order of these three tabs, but the same shortcuts are going to work. F9 is going to open and close the palettes window. F8 is going to open and close the inspector, and F7 is going to open and close the instruments window, which is new. So I'm going to hold off on talking about instruments window. I think I'm done talking about palettes unless there's other questions because the palettes haven't changed a whole lot. Let's see what else. So the black screenshots in the manual. So that's a good observation about that. So the thing is, everyone's vision issues are different, and some people say that the black is more readable. White on black is more readable to them. Depends on what your specific vision issues are. But in any case, not necessarily my decision here. But we'll see. It's not necessarily a done deal on any of this. But since we're talking about that, let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'll go to Edit. By the way, the menus are largely unchanged. If you look through the menus, you'll see almost everything is the same as it was before. I don't know that there's much in the way of new commands or anything. All the stuff that we're used to seeing exists. There is no more split screen view because MuseScore is going to work differently when you have multiple files open. So I think I'm just going to just do a quick tour of the menu to see that things are different. But yeah, mostly everything is the same, right? And there's my plugins there. So very nice. All right. So I was going to go to preferences and just show what the dark theme looks like so y'all can see it. If I go to appearance and pick dark theme, here we go. This is what dark theme looks like. All right. So I'm completely ambivalent. I have no horse in the race. I know a lot of people are really gung-ho about dark themes. I'm not opposed to them, but I don't love them either. They are what they are to me. But I do want to show you that if I then go to that same place, Edit, Preferences, Appearance, I can also pick Invert Score. If I invert the score, I get this look, the black background with the white score with just a single click. Again, for some people with vision issues, this is what they want. And so it's considered an important accessibility feature, even if it's, not for everyone, and definitely not for me. So I'm not going to use the dark theme in this demo here because I'm not a huge fan. But I do want to see what this high contrast does. Whoa. Wow, look at that. Huh, I've never played with that before. Interesting. I wonder what it looks like in dark theme. Wow, that's kind of distressing. Not a fan. Well, I don't know. It is what it is. So anyhow, high contrast themes. Wow, white and black. Interesting. All right, so that's what the high contrast mode is about. Now you've seen it. So I want to walk through what the rest of the main thing. So can scores and text be colored? So yeah, well, that's always been the case. You can always define your own colors for various things. Mostly like under staff properties, there's options for the staff line color. And then in the properties panel for the note colors, there's also the note, the color. There's a plugin to color the notes for you. So yeah, things can be colored already using the properties panel. I'm going to not talk about the properties panel quite yet. I want to talk about the toolbars first. Then I'll come to the properties panel and talk about some stuff there. But I don't think there's any new stuff having to do with color other than just the overall interface stuff and that reverse thing there. All right, so the toolbar here, so the menus are basically unchanged. The toolbar, as we've seen, has these tabs on it where mostly you're just going to live here in the score tab. In fact, let me just close MuseScore and reopen it so you can see what's going to happen. If I close MuseScore and then reopen it, this time I'll use the icon because now it's going to remember my settings. So you'll see we're on the home tab on this thing that's basically essentially the old Start Center, the scores portion of the home tab. I can now say new score because I never saved my thing, right? And then say keyboard, piano, double click it, and done. Because I don't care about the other stuff right now. So there's my score, and I'm kind of back where I was. So let's talk again about this. Mostly you're just going to live here in the scores tab other than when you first start MuseScore and you see the home tab. As soon as you open something, you're here on the scores tab. So what you'll see is now there's the mixer has a button right here, and this brings up the new mixer, which is this. It's different than the old mixer. It's got some new stuff in it that's having to do with the new playback system that I'm going to have to hold off until the beta comes out and it's all really there. But by all means, feel free to play around with the mixer. It mostly does the same thing. Speaking of color, it does not have the color feature the old mixer did. So if that's important to you, I will encourage you to provide that feedback either on the forums or wherever they announce. When they do make the announcement, will be the appropriate place. But in any case, this is the mixer. So let me close that again. Then there's the parts button. So the parts button, let me go ahead and add some instruments to this score. I think the process is going to go similarly, but let's find out. I'm going to press I. It's going to bring up the instruments window, and I'll go ahead and add a flute and hit OK. And now I have a flute and a piano. If I hit the parts button now, I now get, so this is the kind of the equivalent of what used to be file parts. And now it's just a button right there. And you'll see there's some buttons in here. There's a create new part, there's a close, and there's open all. I'm just going to tell you that most of the time, just do open all. This is going to do the same thing that you used to have to go to file parts and then generate all or all parts and then OK. And now it's parts, open all, and done. And yeah, it just opens up all the parts. But you can also open parts individually. So the whole way that we've got to work with parts is going to get a little different. And so we'll do a whole session just on parts in MuseScore 4. But I want to show you that that's the button. Now you'll also see the playback controls here are here, and they now have in them stuff that used to only be in the play panel. So some things that used to only be in the play panel are now right here on the toolbar, and you can also drag this little dude off so that you can make this a freestanding panel if you want. I think you can also, there's something where you double click it. I forgot exactly how it works. But I thought there was a thing where, depending on what you did, you would also see a slider. I'm not seeing the slider right. Maybe I have to resize it. No, supposedly there's supposed to be a slider here that will, kind of scroll through your score, and I'm not seeing it at the moment. So I'm just going to add that to my note to self about things that are missing. Except I've obviously messed up my note taking app. So whatever. I'm going to write note to self. Where's scrub slider? Okay. So, there we go. Oh, and Dave, I saw your comment about the dB markings. And so the deal is these, if you're dealing with basic MIDI, these numbers mean nothing. They don't really mean that. However, the new sound system that MuseScore uses, which is able to use VST instruments and is going to be able to use this new Muse Sounds thing, it's not exclusively MIDI based. And so, yes, it's going to have additional things in it that go above and beyond MIDI. But yeah, so don't, I wouldn't assume that these literally, I mean, they can't literally mean decibels because you don't know how loud someone's speaker is, but as offsets, they could possibly mean that when you're dealing with things that, if you're dealing with a VST that deals in decibels. So that I think it's meant to be a sort of generic numbering system that can work whether you're dealing with MIDI velocity or whatever Muse Sounds deal with, or whatever your VST instrument deals with. So someone else will probably have to explain more about that. All right, so this, by the way, is the undo button tucked way over here. I almost never use the buttons for it. I just use Control Z, but now you know there's an undo button. And there's a redo button here that's grayed out, but if I edit something in the score, now, I have to undo, and now the redo button is enabled. By the way, so when people were talking about properties, let's go ahead and talk about properties. If you want to change the font of your title, properties inspector is how it used to be done, and now it's just called properties. So I'm going to use properties, and I can change the font. Instead of 22 font, make it 32 point font, or change it from Edwin to something else or whatever. All the things that used to be in the inspector are now in properties. But properties, look at that, crashed MuseScore. Crashed. I'm actually a little surprised I haven't crashed MuseScore more. MuseScore 4 alpha, it's really not been very crashy for me at all. Plenty of other issues that I come across, but I have not seen many crashes. Do I want to restore the session? Heck, why not? Yeah, and I got my flute back. Okay, so that's all worked fine. All right, so what I wanted to show was that properties panel. Notice I have nothing selected. In MuseScore 3, if you have nothing selected, the inspector shows you nothing, right? It just says nothing selected, and it's not very useful. Maybe you have to So yes, this is currently on my Chromebook, yes. And I don't know, actually, maybe that's a point about the slider if I enter some notes. Let's try that now. No, that was a good guess though, Dave. And it was the case that if you double clicked it, it would pop back there, and double clicking would pop it out too. And that doesn't seem to be the case now. I don't know if that was a deliberate change or if I'm just doing something weird or there's just some new bug, but not going to worry. Not going to worry about it. Anyhow, when you had nothing selected, the inspector always just said nothing selected, and it wasn't very useful. And this was always something that was one of Martin's pet peeves about it, Martin being Tentacruel. And if you remember, he kind of got on board as the kind of head of design, head of the product for MuseScore after he produced this video, this big, massive review of the MuseScore user interface after he'd already done one on Sibelius. And his Sibelius one was really trashing them. His MuseScore one was saying, this actually isn't half bad, but here's some things I don't like. And then we fixed some of those things, and then he ended up getting hired. And one of the things from his original video was he didn't like the fact that the inspector was empty if you had nothing selected. And I know Colleen has commented on that also, and that's one of the reasons why she's mentioned she didn't know how to use it, because it just looks empty most of the time. Well, now it's actually got some quite useful controls. So for instance, you can control whether certain things show. Like, let me add some things here. I'm going to add a line break here. I'm going to make some of these notes invisible. And, the basic notions of how you do things in MuseScore, adding that line break, I hit enter, selecting notes, I clicked the note, and then, shift right to select a range, and then I pressed V to make invisible. None of that has changed. It's appearances of things that have changed, not so much how you do stuff. But now let's look what happens if I have nothing selected in the score. Let me click where it says invisible. My invisible things just went away, right? That used to be kind of hidden away in the view menu. There was show invisible with a tick box by it. And then it was annoying because if you tried to turn off the display of invisible things, it closed up the menu. Then you had to go back to the view menu if you wanted to untick frames, the showing of frames, and you had to go back to the menu again to untick the showing of the formatting stuff. So if I untick now formatting and untick frames, you'll see the frames have disappeared, that line break symbol has disappeared, and the invisible notes have disappeared. I can also turn on display of margins, and then I can turn back on all those things and do all that from here, right? And then there's hide empty staves right here. So if I now enter some notes into the piano part, I can now, with nothing selected, turn on hide empty staves, or turn off empty staves is how I should word it. Come on. There we go. And now I've got my empty staves hidden. So, and then if I click over here is where I'll see the options that normally go around with hiding empty staves. So hiding empty staves is something you will be able to do directly from properties without having to, open up a menu or anything. So I should comment about these icons. You recognize that this is an eye, right? So this is an eye saying, yes, I can see frames. When I click it, this is a closed eye. Those are eyelashes. So this is saying now the eyes are closed. I can't see the frames. That's the idea. You can see the margin there. Let me close those. So, right, so the open eye means I can see it. The closed eye means I can't see it. All right, that's the iconography that you're going to see for a number of things here. So Marla is asking if the undo and redo buttons can be moved. So there's a good question. The toolbar is mostly customizable. I think I'm seeing a thing I can drag here, but I can't quite get to it. So maybe I can't. Let's see if I go to View, Toolbars. I don't see customization options in here. So I'm not so sure. Oh, you can still do the showing stuff from the view menu also. So I don't know, to be honest, about customizing of the toolbar here. How much is customizable, how much is not. But I'm not offhand seeing a way to do it. If I right click here, I also don't see those options. So I'm not sure about that. And then what other thing that I saw, and yeah, so Benign Pigeon, yes, I see what you're seeing. Oh, look at that. I saw what you were seeing, that it looked like things weren't lined up and somehow the window just wasn't big enough. And now suddenly I see the slider. And so this slider is just basically the playback slider. So this controls where playback is going to start, which, is something I need to show you also, which is going to make some people happy. Does this enable me to move these guys anymore? No, I still don't see any handles for moving this thing. So can I add this somewhere else? No, this doesn't look possible. So it is where it is. All right. The thing I want to show you is this. By the way, notice that while I'm entering the notes, just playing them really short, that's a bug that was fixed a few days ago, but for whatever reason doesn't seem to be in the alpha. But you'll get a normal length note when you enter notes, before the real release. So when I play this score now, let me play the score. Not a very interesting score. But now check this out. If I select just the flute, it plays just the flute. If I have other instruments in here, if I add myself a baritone saxophone also, and then give it some notes, I can select just the flute, and it plays just the flute. Select just the flute and baritone sax, and it plays just the flute and baritone sax. So that's a nice improvement. I'm hedging on this because I've been trying this for a while, and I still am in the habit of just selecting a measure to start playback there. And now that's only going to play the piano. So you have to get in the habit of selecting a specific note rather than a measure. I still think there's room for improvement there personally, but in any case, it's great to have that ability to say, I only want to hear the flute. Now I'm only hearing the flute. I only want to hear those two instruments. And now I'm only hearing those instruments. Now only the piano. And I now back to hearing everything, right? So not having to use the mixer and fiddle around with the mute and solo buttons all the time feels like a win to me. Feels like a win. So I still think there's room for tweaking. So can you play just the right hand without the left hand? Apparently not this way. If I open the mixer, is there a control for that in the mixer? In the piano here, I don't see a control for it in the mixer either. So in order to do that, I have to get fancier. So I don't have an answer on how you might do that, other than make the notes silent. So here's where I want to show you now something in the properties panel. So the properties panel is the old inspector redesigned visually, but there's been some important functionality improvements. So let's say I want to hear the right hand only, and I want to make the left hand silent. I'm going to select the left hand to make them silent. Now, if you think MuseScore 3, what I just did there, selecting that measure, would have just made the inspector go blank, because it's going to tell you now, oh, you've got a mixed selection. You've got notes and stems selected, and I don't want to show you the note properties anymore, right? That was one of the most annoying things about the inspector, was if you selected a range, it couldn't give you any useful controls. But what you'll see now is with a range selected, it's going to say, hey, that range contains notes. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the notes commands, the things that are relevant to notes. So I can uncheck play and play. So it's really easy now to make range selections and then just change the things you want. So like even if there's text in here, let me add a text in here. If I select that measure, it's going to give me the note commands here, the ability to change their playback. But if I keep scrolling, it also gives me the text commands. So I can, while I'm at it, change the size of that text. I mean, that's pretty spiffy, right? I mean, it is pretty darn cool. Select a range, and then the inspector, instead of showing you only the controls that are common to everything that's been selected, it shows you everything that's relevant at all. So if you've got both notes and text selected, it shows you all the controls that are relevant. And then if you use a text control, it affects just the text. If you use a note control, it affects just the notes. So this is going to be a huge win. Malu Rogers saying something about a home button on your Mac ProBook. I'm not sure what you mean by that. So maybe you'd have to, like, were you starting to say don't? And then the question is, are you looking at MuseScore 4? Because this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about MuseScore 4, the alpha release. So So yeah, that's my question for you there. So yeah, if you have to have, this is MuseScore 4 we're looking at, and it's not released yet. It's the alpha pre-release, and even the pre-release is not a thing yet. So yeah, what you'll see is that there's a lot of things that are just designed to be more straightforward, more simple, and also things like once you've selected this measure, some useful things that you might want to do, like insert measures, are right there in the properties menu. Insert measures. Oh, I want to insert two measures, and I want it either after the selection or before the selection or at start of score. I don't know that after selection actually works. It didn't work last time I tried it, but let's find out. Hey, it does work. Oh, no, it works. It just doesn't do anything different. I know there was some concern about, like, if you had a key change or a time signature change and you wanted to insert measures right there, would they go before or after the key change or time change? None of that's actually changed here. But anyhow, those controls are there, as is the delete measures. So the properties panel is now much more powerful, right? It's got some stuff that used to be style settings, like hiding if empty staves, and it lets you just get to the style settings dialog, which looks essentially identical to the old one. It lets you get to the page settings dialog, which also looks essentially identical to the old one. Does it have the bug fix where you can't really type numbers? 650. Oh, look at that. You can type into the staff space field now. I love it. Yay. You can type into the staff space size field now. You never could in MuseScore 3 or 2, I think. Yeah, the properties panel now has the ability to change settings for more items, and it has additional things in it that weren't there before. I think also if you select a range, I think we're also going to see, show more, because it's trying to decide what things you think it thinks you want to see and what things you might not want to see. I think also, if I'm not mistaken, I thought there was something. Oh, if I click on appearance in here. Yeah, so this is where some of the settings about like offsets and snapping to grid and what used to be the stacking order, that's all here under the appearance tab. So yeah, you'll have to find your way around. So there's a lot of new stuff, and here's the playback settings are grouped together under playback. And then if you move from measure to measure, the playback section stays open. So it'll take a little while to kind of get used to, what's actually going on and exactly how things work. Take a little while to kind of unpack how all that works. But I think you'll find that overall you can do a lot more in this properties panel than you could before. What I was looking for is, I was pretty sure there used to be a width for the measure in here, and I'm not seeing it now, so I don't know if I'm not looking in the wrong place or what. But yeah, I thought that what used to, the stretch commands to make a measure wider or narrower, I thought that there was a way to get to those from the properties panel also, but I'm not seeing it now. So either it was removed or I'm just looking in the wrong place. All right. So Malu's asking about beaming, and so I did mention the beam properties, and this hasn't changed between. Well, it's partially changed. In MuseScore 3, you're going to use the beam properties palette. So under palettes in MuseScore 3, you'll find a beam properties. In MuseScore 4, this is also something. If you want to beam in a group of 3, you can select this F here and go to properties. And let's try show more. Oh, no, beam. I'm going to click the beam tab here. And you'll see these controls. These are the same controls you'll see in MuseScore 3 and the beam properties palette. And then you want to start a new beam on that F. So start a new beam. And then you want this E to be, in the middle of the beam. So select the middle of beam here. And then you want to start a new beam on the C, start that. And now you've got 3 3, 2. If you want the entire score that way, and this is also the same in MuseScore 3, right-click the time signature properties, and you get similar controls here, where you can change the beaming of the score, and then all your notes. Now I can enter more eighth notes, and they'll be beamed the same way. So if you want the whole instrument beamed that way, do time signature properties. But if you want individual notes beamed that way, you can use the properties panel in MuseScore 4. In MuseScore 3, it's the beam properties palette. And this is why I said we don't really need that beam properties palette anymore in MuseScore 4. It's all here. It's all here under properties. All right. So how do you change that default A4 in print? How do you press Control Home? Oh, I see what you're saying. Home. Oh, okay. Now I see what you're saying. The home key is a key that most larger keyboards have, but smaller keyboards, including most Mac keyboards, typically don't have. But usually it's FN. If you have an FN button or some other special button on your keyboard, FN plus right. I mean, FN plus left is the kind of universal shortcut for home. That's how you move a score to the home. FN plus right is the shortcut for end. And so, yeah, this isn't a MuseScore thing. This is a general computer thing. Every computer program, if your particular keyboard doesn't have a physical home key, FN left, or whatever your equivalent, like on my Chromebook, it's called the everything button. So it's the everything button plus left that does the equivalent of home. But that works on all programs. It's not a MuseScore specific thing. So yeah, I think I'm just about done with this tour because I wanted to show you the basic stuff. The note input toolbar, I just wanted to mention, has a few extra things. It's got, you know, the same stuff that's always been there, just looks a little different. There's a little drop down here for, you have to kind of click and hold to show the options underneath the note input menu. But slurs are on the toolbar now because people kept confusing them with ties, and so the hope is by putting them both on the toolbar, people will see them back to back and not get confused. Also, the most common articulations are here on the toolbar. And you can customize the toolbar there by adding more things by hitting that plus button. You can also use the gear icon to customize things further. So if there was a way to move those buttons somewhere else, it would have to do with those gear icons. But I just don't know that that's actually going to turn out to be the case, that I don't know that those things are customizable. So that's been my tour. Oh, so the last thing I need to show you here is opening a score, an existing score. And I'm going to talk about all the improvements in the engraving in MuseScore in a separate episode because they're pretty phenomenal. I've been showing them off in the music engraving workshop a little bit. So those of you who are in the music engraving workshop, you've already seen a demo of this. But when I open a new score, it's a new window. See? One window, another window. So this might take a little getting used to. Some people are saying they're not happy with it. Other people are like, wow, that's really great. I think it depends on how you're used to using things. For me, it's great to be able to just Alt-Tab and flip back and forth between scores the same way I flip back and forth between other windows. And then I can resize the windows and see them to get, simultaneously if I want. So there's all sorts of things that I will be able to do, but because these are separate windows, but it is a difference that you should know about. If you have multiple scores open, they will be multiple windows. And this is for performance reasons, everything having to do with how the new playback system works with VST instruments and the new sound library is going to work better if it's managing it through separate processes. So this is just sort of a fact of life. But in any case, this is like what Reunion looks like in MuseScore 4, and I don't have time to go into all the details, but there's so many things that are going to be better, that are better here, about the default size and shape of slurs, the default spacing of notes. There's so many things are improved, and I'm really looking forward to doing a whole episode just on all the improvements in the engraving and how your score actually looks by default. All right. So Is VST ready? Oh, so here's the thing to know about VST. VST instruments are not yet supported on Linux. So I'm running on a Chromebook, meaning I'm running the Linux version. So that's not there yet. It'll probably be there for MuseScore 4.1. VST instrument support is there for Windows and Mac OS, but it's pretty limited. So the plan is to expand it and add the Linux support for like MuseScore 4.1. So it's a high priority. But if you're on Windows or Mac OS, you can certainly try out the VST support, but you will find it's pretty limited. So again, at some point, I will do a whole cafe just showing what you can do with VST instruments. I'll fire up my Windows computer for that. So yeah, plenty of things that are such big areas that I'm going to want to go into much more detail. But engraving is one, VST is one, parts are one, and the new Muse Sounds library, when that becomes available, will be one. There's a few other miscellaneous nice new features that will be worth talking about, like the fact that retardandos will finally actually play back, and you'll have some control over that. So there's some lots of little nice new things. But I wanted to give you a basic tour to show you around, show you where things are, how things are organized, so that as you play with things, you would be able to understand what you're doing. So for giving feedback on anything about MuseScore 4, I think the place to do it is going to be the forums on musescore.org. There's certainly the announcements forum, and that's where announcements are going to be made. And if they want you to make feedback somewhere else, they'll tell you. But there's a documentation forum. Feel free to provide feedback there. It would be good to give a reason, not just you personally don't like dark things, but have some objective reason why, because otherwise it's just one person's thing versus another. But there could be objective reasons that I'm not aware of, where, some study or whatever. So by all means, give the feedback. So that's my show. And what I'm going to do here is, well, I'm going to do it anyhow. No, I'm not going to do it. I was going to try to play the MuseScore Café theme, but the thing is, it doesn't play back right yet. There's a number of issues with the playback that aren't not quite good enough where I feel good about showing you how the MuseScore Café theme is going to sound in MuseScore 4. So I'm going to fire up MuseScore 3 so I can play my theme music for you to end. Oh, yeah, but print, it's not going to print that way. I mean, the print manual. The screenshots printing dark. Yeah, that's a good point. When you print the handbook, screenshots will use more ink if the screenshots are using a dark theme. Now, the thing is, even with the light theme, it's going to show up gray. It's not white, so it still uses more ink than it should. But whatever. All right. Well, I'm pleased to see that there were no other technical issues that went on here other than that one crash that MuseScore 4 behaved, and everything about the session itself seemed to have behaved. And so I consider this have been a good, successful introduction to MuseScore 4. The fact that the announcement is not there, I'm not sure exactly what's going on. It might have to do with some of these playback issues that they maybe want to take another look at before making an announcement. I don't know, but I will keep you updated. But yeah, as soon as I have links that I can share, I will make sure that everyone knows about them. I'll send out a new update to my newsletter. I'll post them to my community. I'll post them in the comments to this video, etc. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. Next week will be the score of the month, and that's going to mean we're going to talk about the score that's being featured for the music engraving workshop. If you'd like to participate in the workshop, highly recommended. We're having a great time. We're working on a string quartet right now and learning all about the notation issues that come up and how the MuseScore issues that come up in notating the string quartet. Tomorrow's music masterclass, we'll be talking about some Beatles music and some of the music that you all have created, either in response to my prompts or just some music that you've created on your own. So thanks a lot, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. Okay. See you soon.